In this video, I'll show you the assembly, radio and gyro setup, and my initial impressions of my new Global Jet Club FC1. Today is an exciting day. Today I'm gonna get started with the build of the new Global Jet Club FC1. Been looking forward to this one for a while. This plane comes plug and play. It includes the retracts already installed, the fuel tank installed, all of the servos from FreeSky already installed, bunch of extensions, pipe pre-installed. There's a lot of the work already done here for you, so I'm expecting this to be relatively quick build. But yeah, let's get started. One of the first things I've gone ahead and done is cutting some of the end of the exhaust. It's probably not 100% required. However, I really like maximizing the travel of the thrust vector. That really helps for those pinwheels and different type of flips. So about half an inch removed with a handsaw. In comparison to other planes with thrust vector I've seen, my previous plane was a Pilot RC J10. All the linkages of the thrust vector system look much more solid. It looks like a much better design. The other one had a lot of different elements that have a lot of slope. This one, on the other hand, feels rock solid. For power, we're going to be using here an ASX 240, so it'll be plenty of power for this plane. The pipe already comes pre-installed with the holes for these bolts marked but not drilled. So I just have to drill them using here M4 bolts with lock nuts. And that basically fixes the pipe in place. And then for the turbine, basically measured 25 millimeters from the beginning of the straight section of the pipe all the way to the end of the exhaust of the turbine, so 25 millimeters there. That will give you the position to mark and drill the 4 holes for the bolts of the turbine. Also part of the thrust vector system is obviously the linkages that go to the servos and the servos themselves. So in this case, the servos already come installed, servo arms already installed. We just have to set up the ball links into the servo arm. The linkages, they are very, very long. However, they also feel very, very solid. They are carbon fiber rods. And again, the whole system feels fairly solid despite the complexity and the long length of these rods. Moving now onto the retracts. Not much to do here really. The retracts already come installed from the factory. The only thing that I did here is double checking that all the bolts are properly tightened. They were good, but I always like to make sure that nothing came loose on transport. Fuel tank also installed from the factory. One thing I've also checked already is to make sure that the fuselage is not gonna interfere with the retracts when they are extending. Another nice detail, the vent is already installed from the factory, so a lot of these little steps always take a lot of time on a build, and they add up. In this case, a lot of them are already done for you, so that's really nice to see. Moving on to the front of the plane, we have the fuel dot that already comes installed from the factory. And I went ahead and already installed the fuel shut-off valve, so I can access here easily. I just clamped it and secured it with an aluminum L bracket that I had from some old project, so I just reused that. The main downside I've seen so far on this plane regarding construction is the access to this area. So this area right here is where most of the accessories are gonna live, and the access is pretty restricted. So the only access point is here from the front. So not the most convenient thing to have for assembly or for maintenance down the road. On the plus side, they include this plywood seat. So this basically is gonna go inserted there. So you can kind of set up your layout outside of the plane, but eventually you're gonna have to move it inside and do the final connections in there. Regarding the layout, we have the fuel pump, the brake gyro. I'm gonna be using the AG68. We have the ECU for the ASX turbine. We have the UAT from Interco. This is the iTrap 60. And then I'm going to use the same electronics I was using in the Pilot RC J10. So it's going to be the FreeSky RB35. And for Gyro, I'm going to be using the Cortex Pro. The servo extensions already come routed from the fuse to the front from the factory. One thing that is required, at least with the layout I'm using, is a longer turbine cable. So the cable that goes from the turbine to the ECU, the one that comes with the turbine in the box, is about 28 inches in length. In this case, I made a 40 inches cable using 16 gauge wire, just to make sure that we have enough length to reach the ECU in the current layout. Moving now to the nose section. As before, the retract already comes completely installed from the factory, as well as the FreeSky servo and all of the linkages. So all of this comes as you see here. I went ahead and installed some Velcro for the batteries. So we're going to be using 3 LiPo batteries. In this case, they're going to be 3,300 milliamp hour batteries. At least we're going to start with that. It's likely that we're going to have to use some extra weight in the front to make sure that the balance is correct. And I think this is the other situation where the access could be better. So as you can see here, the only way to access the batteries is through this pretty small opening, and any work that has to be done here is pretty uncomfortable just because the access is very limited. So we'll see how we go about working on the front of the cone if I need to add any additional weight.
All right, the nose cone is now installed. I've also gone ahead and set up the 2 different receivers. These are the FreeSky TDR6. Now that everything is installed, we can take a look at the center of gravity. I have gone ahead and installed 500 grams of lead in front of the batteries. That gives us a center of gravity of 167 millimeters behind the leading edge of the wing at the root. That matches with the recommendation of the manufacturer. So that will be our starting center of gravity. I just finished doing some run-ups with the turbine. One issue I noticed when turning the gyro on the highest gain is that the elevator was moving quite a bit when going up in RPM. It looks like the position where the cortex is located is moving a little bit more than ideal. I'm gonna move the cortex to a different location and hope that that fixes that issue. I've installed a little plate right in front of where the original plate is, and the cortex is there now. I just did another test with the turbine, and those oscillations are pretty much gone, so I think I'm gonna go with this.
Well, it's been a couple of weeks since I finished the build of this plane, and I finally got the chance to do a couple of flights with it. I have about 12 or 13 flights with it. So far, so good. Precision-wise, really good. It handles slow rolls, point rolls, knife edge, not much coupling there, everything without any issue. On 3D with the thrust vector. For now, taking it pretty easy, but all the 3D basic maneuvers I've been doing, high alpha, hovers, flat spins, pinwheels, it's been pretty comfortable so far. In the near future, I would like to try a couple more advanced maneuvers like rolling harriers, maybe some inverted harriers, maybe even some gentle slaps. I'm still pretty early in terms of tuning the rates, expos, gyro gains, but I thought it'd be good to at least give you an idea of what my setup looks like at the moment. I'm sure it will change in the future, and if that happens, I probably will make a new video, but for now, this is what I have. In terms of radio setup, I like to keep it pretty simple and minimize the amount of switches I have to touch during flight. I have a toggle for retracting landing gear, a 3-position switch for flaps. I basically set up flaperons. And then I have a 3-position switch for gyro settings. So at the very bottom is just gyro disable, more of an emergency case. Middle position is my default. Most of my flight happens here. This is the low gyro setting. And then I have a high gyro, basically high gain. I only use this for high alpha and hovers. I don't really want to use this when the plane is traveling fast because we might get into oscillations because of the high gain. Other than that, I use full rates and thrust vector on at all times. And of course, I have pretty high expos settings to make sure that I can still control the plane safely and precisely towards the center. So the basic idea here is that for precision aerobatics, I pretty much don't really need the thrust vector in this area, and the same with the rudder. Once I feel like I need extra yaw or pitch authority, and I go past the beginning of the motion, the center position of the stick, that's when the thrust vector will start kicking in and will help with that sliding of the tail. So in a loop, I only need elevator, and if I want to do something a bit sharper, like a square loop with sharp corners, then the thrust vector will start kicking in. Still, everything easy to control. And if I'm doing some flips or hovers, high alpha, then that's where the 3D throws and the very high deflection on the thrust vector becomes pretty useful. I have set up flaperons because it helps reduce the approach speed and the landing speed. Not really required. The first couple of landings I did without flaps at all, and the plane still was able to come down slowly. But flaps always help, and it's something pretty easy to set up. I have this set up with different flight modes based on the flap position because each flap setting requires different trim for the elevator. So when the flaps are down, the elevator needs to pitch up a little bit to compensate. Other than that, I have my kill switch on this cool safety toggle. And these are my Cortex Pro settings. Again, I'm sure I will tune things as I fly this plane more, but for now, this is working pretty well for both precision and for 3D flying. Well, that's all for now. As I get more flights with this plane and I understand better what the best settings are, I'll make sure to make a video update talking about how the flying characteristics feel as I get more comfortable with it and how my settings, whether it's on the gyro or on the radio, might have changed. Until then, happy flights!